RASPBERRY space PI, Raspberry Pi, one of the most hot topics of today's world. But before we get on to that, I'm announcing this new series, Numbers Only, just like this one right now. Hope you guys like it, and also I'd love feedback on the show. Anyway, as we were, so if we search on Google like what is Raspberry Pi, then we will get this definition that Raspberry Pi is a low-cost credit-sized computer that plugs into a computer monitor or TV and uses a standard keyboard and mouse. It is a capable little device that enables people of all ages to explore computing and to learn how to program in languages like Scratch and Python. But that is actually not the limitation of Raspberry Pi. You can do all sorts of things on it, from programming from Java to C++ to HTML, PHP, whatever you want. Anything that you can do on your typical computer, you can do it on Raspberry Pi. According to Wikipedia, the Raspberry Pi is a series of small single-board computers developed in the United Kingdom by the Raspberry Pi Foundation to promote teaching of basic computer science in schools and in developing countries. The rest you can see here, and I will also link it down in the description. So basically, Raspberry Pi was established in UK by Eben Upton as the CEO. So let's have a brief visual history about it, shall we? This is the first prototype, 2006. This is Raspberry Pi Foundation, formed in 2009. 2011, Raspberry Pi prototype revealed by BBC. These are the alpha boards, 2011. So that's when it basically started to take shape. And finally, like at the end of 2011, beginning of 2012, the first beta board came out, and this was very much important because they used the BCM2835 chip in it, and this Broadcom chipset allowed Raspberry Pi to run full Linux based operating systems. The picture you're seeing now is the first ever box shipped from China to the Raspberry Pi Foundation for their first shipment out, like public selling. So before we move on to the actual performance numbers, I would like to go over the spec sheet, like from where it was till where it is now. So the Raspberry Pi started with the Raspberry Pi Model B, came out in 2012 at $35. Started off with Broadcom BCM2835 chipset, which was long lasting. It was an ARM processor with a single core, and it was running at 700 MHz with a 512 MB of RAM. 2 USB 2.0 ports. Fine. Raspberry Pi A+, pretty much same thing, just lesser RAM and 1 USB port. They tried to make it compact. Then came Raspberry Pi 2, 3 years later from the original one. Still priced at $35, but this time they're using an upgraded processor, BCM2836, and the best thing is it's using Cortex A7 ARM, which is a huge jump, with a quad-core processor. Can you believe that? And it was running at 900 MHz and a 1 GB of RAM, double memory, same price. Technology grows. Then they tried to make out even compact boards, like for like running a few scripts, or maybe something that an embedded project needs. Just a few scripts, continuous loops, whatever, like very cheap, $5 only, using the very old 2835 chipset, single core, 512 RAM. But this time it's not 700 MHz, same chipset, they overclocked it to 1 GHz. Then came out Raspberry Pi 3, another breakthrough. Of course, $35. See, price is consistent. BCM2837, quad-core processor, 1.2 GHz and 1 GB DDR4 memory. And this time they're putting in 4 USB ports, just like Raspberry Pi 2, 1 year before, right? See? Okay, coming on to Raspberry Pi Zero W and Raspberry Pi Zero WH, which are variants of the Raspberry Pi Zero itself, each placed at $5 more than the previous one. Basically what they're doing is just upgrading the spec sheets with not the actual like performance markers, but just small stuffs like micro OTG and ability to run LCD panels and all those things. Basically that. Okay, and some chipset internal soldering stuffs here and there. That's it. So then comes Raspberry Pi 3B Plus, which was the current ruler until Raspberry Pi 4 came out. Raspberry Pi 3B Plus BCM2837B0, still priced at $35 US, video core 4, 1.4 GHz, which is a very huge upgrade from Raspberry Pi 3, the base model, and 1 GB DDR4 RAM, same. Okay, so Raspberry Pi 3 model 8 Plus was basically meh, because same thing, lesser RAM, nobody wants to buy. Okay, that was basically it. But they were targeting an audience who wanted lesser priced computers which would function just as the same, and it would. Now the Raspberry Pi 4 is out, which is fantastic. It came out in 2019, June 24. Lots of YouTubers and other tech enthusiasts made so many videos about it, and this video is all about numbers, compiling all of that previous videos. So it's running Broadcom BCM2711, Cortex A72, ARM version 8, point to be noted, 4 cores and 1.5, which is 100 MHz more than 1.4, but single clock wise it's not much, but when you're running multi-core, then it's a huge bump. I'm telling you, it's still running video core Broadcom GPU, but although it's not mentioned in this website, but it's video core 6 this time, and it is able to run 4K videos via the 2 HDMI ports. I can show you the full image here. Yeah, see, this is the image. Here you have the main processor, this is your memory module, these are the BIOS chips, and this one is your Ethernet port, and these blue things you see right here is that the new USB 3.0 ports that they adjusted to this model. And this is great because previous models were only USB 2.0, but this time they added USB 3.0, and they added 2 micro HDMIs, which is able to run 4K 60 FPS on single port or 4K on both ports at 30 FPS. Here you have the camera port, the AV jack, and the power in, and the power in is now at USB-C, which is great. We have our old GPIO 40 pins, and of course there's an LCD display panel. So that's basically it, and of course there is the PoE, power over Ethernet port, it's still there. So with that being said, the basic spec sheet is just like that. Now we're going to the numbers. So one of the most common benchmark is the LinPack benchmark. What it is that LinPack benchmark is basically a bunch of Fortran based linear equations, some subroutines that is designed to run on certain machines to find out which machines run faster or slower, what benchmark really does. And for these small machines, Linux boxes, small computers, this is one of the most ideal benchmarks ever, and most of the online comparisons till this date has been based on this, except a few file compressions and unzips and all those steps. We'll get on to that later. So according to this benchmark, we can see that the Raspberry Pi 4 excels in every single way, and the performance score is actually 4 times than the last gen Raspberry 3 B+. Moving on to GIMP or GIMP image editing benchmark, we can see the result is quite similar. It's shown here that Raspberry Pi 4 is much faster than Raspberry Pi 3B Plus. On the file compression benchmark, we can actually choose between single thread and multi-thread, which gives us a better view at how the improvements affect our results. So Pi 4 has slightly more clock speed than Pi 3B Plus. Hence, on single threaded file compression, we can see slight performance increase, but whereas on multi-threaded comparison, Raspberry Pi 4 exceeds way beyond Raspberry Pi 3B Plus. This next one I took directly from Tom's Hardware. I hope they don't mind me taking this. I will link their website in the description. So according to their results, we see a very similar results to ours. So Chromium browser launch time is much less in 4B than Pi 3B Plus, as you can see here. Speaking of Chromium browser and internet, we can see the Ethernet throughput benchmark, and in this benchmark Pi 4 scores fantastic than the last gen Pi 3B Plus, because this time they used a 300 megabit per second Ethernet controller, which is a huge improvement for the Pi 4. Some charts from Tom's Hardware to compare with ours, and we can see similar results as to ours, which is the Wi-Fi throughput benchmark. We can see 4B exceeding because of its new Wi-Fi capabilities, and also the Ethernet throughput benchmark is much higher than the last gen 3B Plus. So far all these numbers sound so amusing, right? But it also has a drawback, which is the power draw. So previous gens were just 5 volts with 2.5 amps charger, but this time they are recommending a 3 amps charger with which has a 35 watt-hour power. So as we can see, the power draw is much higher in 4B than the 3B Plus, and with power there comes thermal issues. And here in this chart we can see the thermal throttling benchmark, and we can see that it's rapidly rising, which is great, but then it throttles till it reaches a certain degree Celsius. And it has also been reported that the Raspberry Pi 4 has some thermal issues, which lets it to become very hot within very short times. I'll show you those in a sec. So this is the Raspberry Pi 3B Plus, and this is the temperatures at load times. See, the temperature is only around the processor itself and the memory chip, but wait till you see Raspberry Pi 4. Now would you look at that, look how that heat is spreading and how much hot that processor is at load times. That's a Raspberry Pi 4. At this moment I have received, or most of us have received, a kernel update that increases throttle times or does something that decreases this effect, but it's not that effective at all. You know, with higher power comes basically higher heat. Moving away from power and all of those things, one of the major improvements Raspberry Pi 4 has is its USB 3 port, which allows us to have much higher transfer speed. So we can see in this graph, Pi 4 just shoots through the sky, totally, Pi 4, than the last gen Raspberry Pis. Last but not the least, we have a graph that depicts the change between the last gen and Raspberry Pi 4B. So the boot time, there is a 4.5% change. The idle temperatures is 35.4% change. Peak power and all of these things you can just pause and read it out yourself. It's just simple numbers, easy to understand. So with that we finish this episode of numbers only. So that was all the numbers you necessarily need to know before buying a Raspberry Pi 4. It's a definite upgrade from Raspberry Pi 3, but if you already have a Raspberry Pi 3B Plus, my conclusion is that you don't necessarily go to like need to go to buy another Raspberry Pi 4. Although it is worth mentioning that Raspberry Pi 4 comes in three models at this moment: the 1GB variant, the 2GB variant, and the 4GB variant. But some speculation is still around that they are going to release another model, which will be the 8GB variant. In my opinion, these memories, I think a 2GB variant is just enough, even a 1GB, because the projects that we do in our Raspberry Pis, usually the embedded projects or the IoT projects, it doesn't necessarily require that kind of RAM. And basically, if you already have a Raspberry Pi 3B Plus, it's just going to function just as well as Raspberry Pi 4, unless you need that extra hunk of juice. Like absolutely, your project is absolutely dependent on your processing power or the transfer speed, then go all in, you know. And the Raspberry Pi Foundation have really revealed a desktop kit, like a full desktop kit with the power brick, with the case. And mind you that you will need a new case for this Raspberry Pi 4 if you are shifting or like upgrading from Raspberry Pi 3B Plus. A new power adapter, keyboard, mouse, all this kit is available. You can check out their website. I'll link their website in the description. And I hope that you like this video. Till next time.